Yep. Perttu is the name. Didn't fly from Japan this time. Sadly flew in from Helsinki, which is a lot closer. And I'm going to talk about React Native and WebRTC, or how to get real-time communication working on mobile using those two technologies. So a bit of a calling card. So that there is my very typical Finnish name. I'm a software engineer. I used to be a designer, but then code started paying better, so I quickly switched camps. I'm originally from Helsinki, Finland, although I tend to work a bit around the world, and I mostly focus on mobile and web development, especially React Native, which I've started to love throughout since 2017 when I started working on it. I think it's wonderful. And although I'm a mobile developer, I'm going to be talking the minimum amount of mobile code today, just to give you the idea. And my background is actually in cognitive neuroscience, which then led me to design. And before that, I used to do carpentry, that I still do, but as a hobby. Unlike cognitive neuroscience, that's not a hobby or nothing. But yeah, and you can find me on Twitter with that, and then you have a website also there, which will eventually have all the slides and code examples there. There's going to be a link at the end of this. So I'm going to talk about real-time media on mobile devices. And as said, I'm a mobile developer, so this will come from the mobile perspective. And I'm going to try to sell you the idea that next time you're doing something, do it with the mobile first aspect. And because I'm guessing most of you are not mobile developers, I'm going to show the least amount of mobile code possible to just get the idea across. Basically, just to show you how complex or simple some things are. And I will start by explaining why real-time communication in mobile context is very important. And then we're going to look at the technology, how to make that work, in this case, React Native. And then we're going to talk about this React Native WebRTC package. That's going to be like the main point of the whole talk. And then I'm going to talk about some challenges and opportunities that you have with this technology based on some of the projects that I've worked that have had WebRTC and React Native on them, for example, in telehealth and streaming. So most of you are already probably familiar with what WebRTC is, but free and open source protocol and API for doing real-time communication. And it's a very easy to use on web. I think I did my first time, I ever touched it was 2018. And the documentation on Mozilla side is very demanding. It feels a lot more difficult reading it from there, but once you build something, it turns out that it's actually pretty easy. So what you can do with that is you can, of course, build video calling apps, streaming apps, and then you could use also the data channel for games or whatnot. So that's probably pretty basic. And why would we want to do that on mobile? Well, on mobile especially, users expect real-time communication. We have the calls, we have the videos, we have streaming, whatever, all of those things. They mainly happen on mobile. No one is carrying computer or, well, at least a full-size computer with them all the time. So it's become like this ubiquitous thing that we have in chat apps. There aren't basically any chat apps that don't have some kind of calling. And because we have the mobile as the primary device, real-time communication is the foundational case for the mobile use. And when you also think about the origins of phones in general, they were built to enable real-time communication, just like normal phone calls. So when we start building something that we want to be real-time, we, of course, in my opinion, should start with mobile first. Because there we have the issues of how will it work, how will it look, how will it perform, and also the most amount of users. So they are becoming very crucial for modern apps. So to get started, I'm going to preach you just a little bit about React Native. And because WebRTC is so easy to get started with, I'm also very happy that actually WebRTC on React Native is actually pretty easy to start with. Doesn't really have to be difficult. But if you're not familiar with React Native, here's I wouldn't say pessimistic take, but actually it's pretty much the truth. So it's the most divisive programming language, JavaScript, taking that and using that to build mobile apps. That's React Native for you. But I actually like it for multiple reasons. So because that enables for cross-platform development, so that means, of course, Android and iOS, but also TVs, cars, headsets, and whatnot. And yeah, so it's very versatile. And also one very nice thing about it is that if you have former background in web development, most of the concepts, especially in React, you have experience from that, are going to be quite easy transferable. There's going to be some native stuff and some platform-specific stuff that you're going to have to learn around the way, but it's still pretty easy. And despite being like very close to the web, it's also very close to the native side. So if you ever need to use like native APIs, something that you will have to do when you're doing, for example, video calling in mobile context, it's a lot easier with React Native than it is, for example, with Flutter, which kind of wants to own the whole everything that is happening under the hood. Unlike React Native, which just tries to keep it as close to the native side as possible. But yeah, so how actually start with this? You need technically just 2 commands. First, you start a new project using Expo, which I'm soon going to tell you what that is, and then you start the project. And you end up with something like this. Well, that should be showing my face and another camera, because I built an example app to show how easy it is to do WebRTC video calling. But it uses Expo under the hood. And Expo is a framework for React Native. So what it does, it just makes things a lot more simpler to develop in this context. For example, it provides easier access to native APIs, quicker deployments to app stores. That's something that you have to get used to if you're building mobile apps. And then overall, the development process gets even faster. Like if you're doing basic React Native development, one thing that you usually run into is that how do I get it to the user's devices and whatnot? Expo takes care of that. So there we have the fundamental, the base work for now to start building something. And in order to do that, we need to start integrating this little library, which is very good. It is technically the standard for doing anything concerning WebRTC on React Native. There are some other alternatives as well, but they are not as well maintained as this one. It has a quite helpful forum if you need to ask questions. There's like the documentation is good enough, I would say. The only thing that is kind of missing is the examples, but we're not going to worry about that because you're going to have a link to that one example at the end of this talk. So how do we integrate it? We first, of course, install it. And if we're, in this case, because we're running the Expo, I'd had to add this config plugin, which is just Expo's way of saying that includes some native code from this package. And then if we look at what like comes bundled in with this package, with React Native WebRTC, most of things probably make sense to you already. Like it tries to match the stuff that is already on the web. There's, for example, RTC view, which doesn't exist, and we're going to look at it like what that actually means and what you can do with it. But other things are probably pretty familiar. So, for example, if you need to get an access to camera and microphone, you just use the same media devices, get user media as on web. And if you need to do like any kind of like limitations like frame rate or whatnot, you just pass some properties there. So that's like how you would do it on web as well. And if we want to share our screen from the phone, the function is also very simple. So that's how we get stuff out of there. So then in order to show something, we use the RTC view. And it's basically a normal view. And once you pass it a URL, in this case, it will show the stream. So for example, that could be the video, or it could be also the camera feed from your own camera and start showing that. So it's very simple. This is actually working code from the example that I've created. You don't need more than this to start showing stuff on the screen. In this case, it doesn't show remote stream, but it does show this local stream. So it's very simple, very easy to get started. And this is, of course, for a case where you're doing like calls. So you're doing video calling, audio calling, whatnot. But if you were doing something else, for example, one project that I worked in, we used the React Native WebRTC to power the whole streaming platform on the mobile side. So we had a very similar setup. We actually just had the RTC view and a little bit of JavaScript code to just handle the ICE candidates correctly. And it was actually rather pleasantful to work with. However, if you're gonna do, since the most of the use cases are usually calling with WebRTC, at these times at least, you're gonna need some additional packages. And the fun thing about these is that they're actually all in the same organization, React Native WebRTC organization. And what they do is that they just bring the native side closer to you when you're doing video calling. So React Native WebRTC takes care of all the things that you're doing in the app. You can get the video feed and working the audio, whatnot. But then when you want to integrate it with, for example, headsets and whatnot, and get the events correctly, that someone took off their headphones, so don't put the audio on full from the speakers or whatnot, you're going to need the React Native in-call manager. And then when you want to integrate it with like the native calling side, that if someone calls you and you want to get a notification that, hey, you're being called, and that it actually shows up as like a native view that you see on the right there, for that you need the React Native call keep. With these three, basically, you can build a fully functioning like video calling app very easily, basically not requiring any kind of a native code at all to get things working. And the good thing about React Native and React Native WebRTC in this case is that the performance is like generally very good. Like the only thing you're gonna really struggle with is like lower end Android devices. But in mobile context, that is kind of an unsolved problem in general. Like there are it doesn't really matter what technology you're using, you're gonna run into that problem that lower Androids are a bit of a pain in the ass. But also that you can extend WebRTC very easily to other platforms. So React Native, almost out of the box, you need to do one little package change, supports TV OS. So if you want to do video calling on Apple TVs, that's possible. Same for web. So while usually the way is to build something in the web first and then slowly take it into mobile context or whatnot, you could also do it the other way. So you build the mobile app first, and then you decide that, okay, we want the same functionality on our website. So you start using React Native Web, which is like basically a layer to use React Native components and APIs in the web platform. And there's a shim for that, React Native Web shim for that you can then use to get that working. And you can, this way, you can technically maintain same code base for multiple different platforms. And I think that's where the power comes from starting with React Native, mobile first thinking, and then branching out to others. But while React Native WebRTC is very, very nice library, there are some limitations. So because it's very audio video call focused, if you have any kind of other use case, you're gonna run into some problems. For example, it's always gonna request for microphone permissions. And if you're not doing if you're doing calling, then that's not a problem. But for example, in my case, we were doing video streaming. So you open up a stream, you start watching a video of some guy playing game, and then it suddenly asks you for microphone permissions. And that's gonna be like, why? And it's so hardwired there on a very native level that it's actually pretty difficult to get away from. So we actually had to maintain our custom version of the React Native WebRTC to solve that, which was also not optimal because there were things that we then needed from newer versions. So we would constantly be updating and checking, and sometimes our custom version would break because of those changes. Another severe limitation that there is the no picture-in-picture. So you can do this in the app side very easily. You just draw another RTC view and put that on top of all the other components. And while you're in the app, you can easily use the picture-in-picture. But as soon as you swipe the app away on iOS, everything stops. And you're not gonna get a picture-in-picture. And that's something that you probably would like to have for video calling, watching something. But good thing is that it seems that there is currently, like just a week ago, someone opened a PR that has like a pretty promising implementation of the picture-in-picture. It's for iOS only. on Android, there is an alternative way you could technically solve this. So soon you might be able to do this on both platforms. But yeah, so some key takeaways from this that I hope you get is that React Native in this WebRTC context is a pretty promising and something that I would consider to start with. Like, please build your next project with React Native and React Native WebRTC, and that it can also be very quick to do that. But there are some limitations that I've now mentioned. And for the code examples, there's a full code example and full article of this whole talk findable from that address later this week when I publish it and I have time to fix some of the issues. And yeah, that's all I have. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Perttu. Are there any questions? Over there.
Hi, hello. I'm not really a mobile developer, okay, but at our company we started working with the Cordova project that also promises almost the same.
Yeah.
But so now React is also looking for this improvement or this kind of plugin. Do you see real differences, or do you project more expectations on this project than the other? Well, this is for React, yeah.
Well,
thanks.
Yeah. Well, I've worked with few Cordova projects, and I think it's a good technology. What I'm mainly concerned with is that I find it more difficult to bring like truly native experience, like animations and whatnot, on Cordova side. So I'm not familiar with the WebRTC on that side, and so, but I would say that it's technically, depending how like, it's about the level of fidelity that you're trying to achieve. So I think you have better chance of achieving that with React Native than with Cordova, but that's just my take and my limited understanding of Cordova, because I haven't done it in years now.
Yeah, thanks. It was just to compare, because it was a previous attempt to get hybrid code for the WebRTC implementation, and I think that it failed a little bit. Yeah. But
I think that's common with like some Cordova stuff, that is just like, so eventually dies out.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Thanks a lot.
Over there, we have one more question, at least one more question.
Hello. So you mentioned Flutter on one of your screens. Have you ever considered or at least used Flutter or one more promising mobile cross-platform solution like Kotlin multi-platform in terms of WebRTC? Did you ever try, I don't know, the performance overall feel about consuming some of the WebRTC functionality in Flutter and Kotlin multi-platform?
I haven't used Kotlin multi-platform. I've used the Flutter one, and usually if you go to React Native WebRTC repo to look at the issues, there's some people sometimes referencing between the two that, hey, the Flutter one has already this one, and Flutter, because it has its own drawing engine underneath, it can be more performant than the React Native version in some cases. Not really necessarily on the WebRTC side, but like in general, and that makes it feel fluider. Some people also prefer the approach in it. But that's the thing. Like what I've come across with the Flutter version is that once you want to do like these integrate with the native side, that you get like that, hey, someone is calling you when the app is in the background. Those tend to be more difficult with the Flutter implementation. So if you can keep things inside the app and you don't have to worry about these like native stuff that you want to do outside of the app, then why not? Like, it's, if you like developing it, I think Flutter is as good as React Native in some cases. In some cases, it clearly beats out, but it's like matter of like preference, flavor, basically.
Okay, thanks.
Yep.
Any other questions from anyone? If not, that's a wrap. Thank you very much, Perttu.
Thanks.